Hey everyone, happy Saturday. My name is Krupa Kanea and I'm going to be hosting today's What's in My Studio with local photographer Jon Sanchiz. We will give it just a couple of minutes to get started, but I hope you guys stay tuned and enjoy, and we'll just be on in a minute. Awesome. Heyo. So, like I said before, we're just about to start in a minute. We're going to talk to a local photographer today and get to know about what he does with film and Polaroid, and I'm going to add him in just a second. Oops. Awesome. Hey.
What's up?
Awesome. Happy Saturday. I'm going to take this wire off real quick. Okay. Hey, yo.
What's up?
Not much. I'm really excited. People are going to trickle in over the next couple of minutes, but I figure we can kind of get started with your introduction and let the people know who you are and why we're talking to you today.
All right, great. So my name is Jon Sanchiz. My artist name is Jon Sanchiz with an I. Uh, I changed it because my middle name starts with an I, and there's it's just such a common last name. Same with my first name, so decided to just tweak it a little bit. So I'm a film photographer here in Atlanta. Originally from Anaheim, California, which is where Disneyland is. And yeah, the whole reason I got into shooting film was from my parents, especially my dad. He started shooting Polaroids when I was younger. And, as I got older, I just started seeing them more and not realizing, that I had this background with it. And then when I started, getting into photography, I went and seeked
Yeah.
out on do they still make the film, Polaroid film? Do the cameras even still work? And yeah, from there was just kind of a trip down memory lane. I got one of the cameras from a thrift store, which is a Polaroid camera, like the one in this pin. Just like the normal box Polaroids. And I looked online to see if they still sold film, which they totally did, but it's outrageously expensive. But yeah, so I got into film photography through Polaroids or instant film, and then it evolved into 35 millimeter and medium format and so on.
Nice. So
Yeah.
I I want to rewind a little bit and start from the beginning with you. I know a lot of us who are young millennials is what I like to call it because we're not quite Gen Z. No offense to Gen Z, you guys are doing great, but I definitely saw Polaroids. I have plenty of them of my parents when they first came to the States and like all the pictures that they took. When did you start picking up the Polaroid yourself to start actually shooting and doing this as an adult?
So I think it was either 2 years ago. Uh, Again, I went to a value village around where I used to live here in Atlanta, and I found two pairs of those box Polaroids, that you're so
Yeah.
familiar with. And yeah, so I just picked those up, and as soon as I saw them, it just was this huge flashback into growing up and watching my dad take Polaroids. And so as soon as I found that, I seeked out to see if they still made the film. And at the time, there was a company called the Impossible Project who had bought out Polaroid, and they started making Polaroid film under that name. I think from the research I did, they were still making the film, but it wasn't the same production or quality as the previous Polaroid film. Old Polaroid film used to, have like 10 frames per packet. Nowadays, they weren't able to, recreate that. So the film's a little thicker than it used to be, and now you get 8 to the pack instead of 10. So yeah, probably 2 years ago, I started getting into Polaroids, and it's been a awesome, fun hobby.
Nice. So I've seen, for people who haven't seen your work, just to reference one, go look at the page. It's so beautiful. But I've been very fortunate to see you I guess it would have been when you just started and you had a lot of floral work, and then pre-COVID you did a show at the bakery. Um, yeah, it was at the bakery.
Yeah.
What was that like for you, having to start out and then starting to show your work around town? There are quite a few people who are familiar with you, some who might not be, but um, what's that feel like?
Definitely feels really good to have, my work out there. I think the bakery was one of the first shows, and I always used to go to the bakery a lot when it was, open pre-COVID. I had a lot of friends and artists that played shows there, and I started asking around and seeing if they would ever host a show. Finally, a friend decided to make an instant film show, specifically showcasing, different artists around Atlanta that shot Polaroids or Instax, just any kind of instant film. It was instant film themed show. And they reached out and, same thing. They were like, hey, I've seen your work a lot. Like, you shoot a lot of, my friends around the city. I'd love for you to be in it. And yeah, it was just a fun experience in kind of curating, all the photos I've taken up until then, like, over 100. It was fun, choosing which Polaroids to bring to the show because a lot of them were floral. As I got more into it, I started shooting portraits of people, specifically artists in Atlanta, because I wanted to highlight them, in their work through a portrait. So the show was interesting, definitely again curating, different pieces for it. And yeah, it was really fun meeting all the other artists and finding out how many people, have that same nostalgia, have that same love for, Polaroid film, having it almost be like instant gratification.
What was the hardest part for you in curating that show? Because, so fun fact, my partner was also in the show with you, and that's another for people who haven't seen how we kind of got to meet up and link up again. But I remember sitting on our living room floor and laying out all these Polaroids and being like, okay, maybe this, maybe that. What was your process like?
So I think it was similar to that. I remember pulling out the box where I store them all in. I store them in like a cool and dark place so they don't get damaged.
Yeah.
And I kind of went through my Instagram page and chose some of the ones I posted on there. I don't really have them archived too well, other than on the Polaroid pack, I kind of just write like floral at the cemetery or, portraits of so and so. So they weren't in the best, like, they weren't organized at all. But I remember laying them all out on the floor and there were just so many. I think the show you had to pick between like 5 and 10 or something. So
Yeah.
I had to cut down. I definitely had to cut down from like all the images I had, down to like the best. I think it was like 10 images I chose at the end. But it was fun. So I ended up kind of making it like a theme. I did some floral stuff, and I did some what's called like double exposures. So those are like the images behind me in Polaroid version. Pretty much, it's like layering, a portrait of someone, and then layering another photo in that same image. And then I usually do it with, a person's silhouette, and then I layer it with flowers on top. So most of the photos that I chose were all floral and, a combination of portraits that I love taking and flowers. So it was fun. I think, all the other artists showed different work, but I think, the ones that I had out there, I didn't see a lot of people, shooting that style. So a lot of, artists in that show and people that came by were like, how did you do that on, Polaroid? Like, did you edit it? And I was like, no, like it's instant film, like it happens like in the moment. There's no editing or anything. So it's definitely hard, but it was really fun doing
Yeah.
it.
Um, so I'm not so great with double exposure, so I kind of want to ask a little bit, how long did it take you to feel like you kind of got that technique down? I know when people are first starting, or at least when I first started, it was so frustrating to pick up the film and look at someone and be like, this is going to be such a good shot. And then there would be streaks through it, or something would go wrong. And I was like, oh, it's such an expensive hobby or craft to start if you do it professionally and stuff. What was that learning curve for you?
It was definitely a lot of trial and error. Um, but I think I was able to learn pretty quick how to do it, only because, like you said, the film's so expensive. So I couldn't really take, too many chances. I think each pack of film is almost like $20, and
Yeah.
you get 8 photos. So each photo, like, it's like $2 or $3. It really counts. So yeah, it was definitely a few tries. I always wrote down my process. I wrote down like the lighting condition, how I had the person pose, if I had them, in front of something with background noise, or if I had them, against the wall that was just like one color. Same with the flowers, I would decide if it was like going to be colorful, if I did it up close, far. But I, again, I think it was maybe, I don't know, definitely a few packs of film that took me to do it. But once I got it
Yeah.
down, kept experimenting from there
Cool.
and transitioned it over to a different format.
What made you transition from the Polaroids to 35 millimeter? Did you already know how to work with that medium, or were you kind of being introduced to it?
So I used to work as like a bartender and server in this restaurant in Grand Park, Mescalitos. Some of you may have been there. It's pretty
Yeah.
good. And there was always a regular that came in who worked for this, who worked as a photographer for the studio. He was always like, hey, like, like he'd always ask, like, hey, are you an artist? I'd be like, like I enjoy art and whatnot, but at the time I wasn't really doing anything, and he was like, he's like, I want you to come out to the studio, and I'll give you one of the digital cameras and, you can just shoot for fun and, see the process of it. Like, I think, you have an eye for it. And so it kind of started from there. I had another mentor, his name's Trevor Green, who has been shooting film since, he was younger. And we met through a mutual friend. And, he was the one that let me use, I think it was like a Holga camera, which shoots medium format. It's like a plastic camera. It's really easy. There's like almost no, you don't really have to know anything about
Yeah.
photos except just press the shutter and aim it. Um, so yeah, I got into it from mutual friends, kind of pushing me toward trying film. Yeah, I transitioned to because Polaroid film started getting just too expensive.
Mhm.
And I started realizing that, with 35 millimeter film, like you could, like this is one of the cameras I use. It's a Nikon F2. So as you see, you have, different controls for the shutter speed. On the lens itself, you can set the aperture ring to make the background, blurry or not blurry. You're able to focus in and out. So you just have a lot more control shooting 35, which I think I craved. Once I feel like I mastered taking Polaroids, I felt like, I wanted to do something else and challenge myself. And yeah, the transition was fun. And now I find myself like, shooting 35 millimeter more than I do Polaroids. Now Polaroids are like for like a special occasion, but I still shoot them, but not as much.
Nice. With transitioning into the 35 millimeter and trying to learn and keep going, what is it like for you now that you've been doing this a while? Do you consider yourself an artist where you might not have before?
Definitely. So there were a lot of times where, people would ask, about like the stuff they've seen me post on my Polaroid page,
Yeah.
and it took me a long time to be like, yes, I'm a photographer. I would always be like, yeah, I take photos, some photos. It was really hard to be like, to own to being like, yes, I'm a photographer and yes, I'm an artist, But I think, from friends and other artists, they were like, hey, you gotta, really accept that because, it's what you do. You're out taking photos, you're out creating art. So why, wouldn't you call yourself, a photographer, an artist? And I think once I, took that in, I took it a little bit more seriously. And again, I started trying to get into more shows. I started trying to, shoot more people, get more portraits again to kind of highlight those artists in Atlanta.
Yeah.
And there, I think it just kind of, you know, evolved into what it is now.
That's really cool. So let's kind of move to current day a little bit. I know you have prints, they're beautifully displayed behind you. Um, what's where do you start if someone's first coming into photography and 35 millimeter and they want to start doing prints and stuff? What is something that you would definitely tell them to do?
So the camera I'd recommend, and I have it right here actually, is the camera my friend recommended that he said he, started shooting with in high school, and tons of other people, say there's like few cameras as starters. Is this Pentax K1000? As you see, it's a lot more simple than that other camera I had. Um, So I'd recommend anyone that wants to start film, to shoot. I'd recommend the Pentax K1000 specifically. The internal meter in it is awesome. It's really accurate. The controls are very minimal. You only have to really, you don't even really have to know, the shutter speeds or understand it, but you can kind of mess with the meter, and look at it that way.
Yeah.
And yeah, the camera is just, there's no tricks or anything. It's just super simple. If you, can learn how to read the meter, which is pretty easy, you just got to keep it, in the middle and just take the photo and, you get beautiful images from it. I'd recommend that camera. As far as prints go, when you get the film developed, and you get your negative scans back, it's kind of just depending on, which one of your images you like the most. When I first started, I try to select a lot of print because I still had that, like, I don't know, I still had to have like a physical copy because I still love shooting Polaroids and having, something like physical instead of just seeing it on the computer. So I would try to, you know, make prints of whatever I shot, and at the time I just started shooting, flowers, stuff on walks. But the more I, made prints, the more I started to, same thing, laying out my work and seeing like, what I liked shooting. Like when I put prints on, I was like, all right, so it looks like I shoot a lot of portraits of people or a lot of street photography or I shoot a lot of flowers. So once I figured that out, I was like, all right, I think I'm going to just focus on shooting those things specifically.
That's really cool. Um, I guess let's talk a little bit about that specifics of your style then. We've definitely mentioned, like you just said, the florals, the street photography, the portraits. What is, I guess, what's your favorite thing to shoot? If you had a choice and you could just focus on something, would it be those three things or would you expand out to something new?
So the three things I definitely love shooting are like floral stuff, portraits of people, and street photography. Um, as COVID has, been, as we've entered like this pandemic, it's been harder to shoot portraits of people, like at a safe distance. So I've definitely, as COVID has started, I've definitely, started experimenting with different, uh, photographing different things. Same with, my partner getting into photography too. We both started going on walks, and I started shooting different things as far as, like instead of shooting like these portraits of people and filling it with another image, I started shooting like objects, like statues at a cemetery or, whatever it was, and I'd layer it with maybe flowers, I'd layer it with something else, So as COVID has happened, it's definitely been, kind of fun to like get a little bit more creative, because you're limited to, doing some of that work, that I used to do so much.
Yeah. Since you can't take the images the same way and you're saying COVID has impacted, do you think that this is going to continue to impact you as we come out of like this COVID era, or you think you'll kind of go back to your old format of working?
I think I have more like an appreciation of what I've been doing since COVID started,
Yeah.
I definitely still practice shooting portraits of my partner. We live together and we both constantly take portraits of each other, and share different techniques. And, again, we just have, each other to practice on, which is awesome. I feel like I won't ever really, get rusty in that, taking, portraits. But I've done a few shoots since COVID, like portraits for bands and whatnot. But it's been a little difficult because I have to do them, at a safe distance, and we're wearing masks, and I don't get to get these like close portraits of people like I like. Uh, I bought different lenses, that I can shoot from further away to make it look like they're, right in front of me. But yeah, I think, since COVID has happened, like I said, it's definitely opened a lot of doors creatively. And, I think I just have more, tools to work with.
That's really cool. Um, Tools are definitely important in photography. Have you ever considered any other medium alongside this?
Um, so I've, I've started, I've like always wanted to make prints in the dark room. I took a course with my friend Trevor, my mentor, at the studio in Atlanta that offered you could buy like a membership and you could use their dark room and you could make prints, you could develop film. So we were doing that for a while. I think that was like the next step in shooting film for me was developing my own film. Making prints is a little harder because you have to have more equipment for it. You have to have like an enlarger, you have to have all the chemicals, the trays, somewhere dark with running water. Like there's just so much to it in making prints. But developing film has been fun. That's something you could do, kind of anywhere. You could like go in the closet, and just tape off the light comes in and do that. But that process was really fun. There were a few times like I was almost always successful, but there were a few times where developing film as I was starting to learn how to do it, I messed up the rolls. So it was, there were a few times where it was pretty upsetting to, do the whole process. And, you took it out of the canister, the images are just gone because I missed a step or I did something wrong. But, I guess that's kind of what you get with film, it's, predictable, but, when you're, developing it and whatnot, it's kind of like, you have to prepare yourself for things like that. Same with Polaroids, like you might shoot an image, but it might turn out a little differently than you thought because it was dark or your hand was shaking or whatever it was. But I think it's all just a learning experience.
Nice. You've definitely mentioned your mentor a couple of times. I kind of wanted to know, is there anyone else like creatively that you would want to work with that you think would be like your ideal, like if I could do a project with this person, this is what I want. Do you have a person like that?
Uh, I think there are a few. Yeah, there are a few artists that I've got to work with in Atlanta for sure. One of my best friends, Juan, he moved out to Texas. He was another big part of someone who pushed me into shooting more film. Um, I've worked with him a little bit, and with Polaroid specifically because he shot Polaroids a lot. I think I got him a little bit more into like 35 millimeter and whatnot. Um, Working with my partner has been fun, showing her techniques, like explaining them and hearing them out loud, has definitely taught me more about it, and same with her, in her shooting and the research she does, like, just constantly like learning. Recently I worked with a band called Los Ladrones, just like punk rock and roll, like Spanish. They were really fun to work with. I had met them before at other art shows, and I just love their energy. And yeah, I kind of just like working with any artist. When I work with any artist, I always like to collaborate with them. I don't so much like bring an idea to the table and I'm like, this is my idea, and that's it. Whenever I work with anyone, I'm like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Like, what's your idea? What do you think about this, or what do you want to
That's
bring to?
really cool. Um, Before I forget, guys, if you're watching and you have any questions, please drop them in the comments or use the little question mark bubble down below and we will answer them to the best of our ability. But I I want to see about advice you have. There are people always starting and always doing things. Did you ever take any formal classes alongside your mentorships that you would recommend to people, or do you recommend for new photographers to really start and find someone that's willing to help guide them through the process?
Um, I'd recommend, like I think you watching YouTube videos helped a lot. Um, Kind of just Googling different questions about photography helped me. Um, it was a little difficult to find photographers in Atlanta that I could ask questions to. I guess when I had started like a year or two ago, I didn't really know that many like photographers. The artists I met were all like musicians, poets. Some of them shot film, but I just never thought to ask them. But there's definitely different like communities on Instagram and pages I follow, and I constantly ask, different kind of photographers techniques. I'm always, up for helping people, and giving recommendations and tips. Whenever I get asked about it, again, like, when I brought out that camera, I always recommend certain cameras, certain film. Um,
Cool. Someone, sorry to like drop off. Someone named Green Marble asked, "What's your favorite film?"
so my favorite films to shoot, and I have some of them, are the Kodak Color Plus. Uh, as you can tell from the colors, it's like red and yellow. Kodak film tends to be really warm. The specific film, I think they reproduce it from maybe, like the 90s and, 80s and whatnot. So it's like older film emulsion. It has really warm tones, which, I think my whole vibe is really like warm and dreamy images. I love shooting that film. Recently, I started experimenting with more like wacky films. Like Filmography comes out with a lot of weird films. Like this one's called Metropolis. So a lot of the colors are like muted tones, kind of like how this orange is on my shirt. It's like a burnt orange. Been enjoying shooting with that, and then this one's been my favorite. It's called Lomochrome Purple. So this image is like a kind of like an infrared film, but you don't have to use any filters or anything special. You just insert it in your camera and shoot. It turns blues into like turquoise. It turns yellows into pink. It turns reds into like red pink, like hot pink, and then greens. I think it turns them purple. So it's like otherworldly, and I love shooting with those, and I get the most creative with those. A lot of the portraits behind me, like these are shot on that film. Like it really makes some of the colors pop, and yeah, it's my favorite films for sure.
That's awesome. Do you have a favorite photo that you've taken?
I have a lot actually. Um, I think my favorites for sure are from my series called Vivir en Sueños, which translates to Live in Dreams. So it's from the series behind me. I made, I don't know, like 12 prints, on this wall, and they're all from that series. They're all double exposures. So they're all, silhouettes of people layered with flowers. I think, that series right now is my favorite, and I'm still, continuing it. Not as much as I was before, because like I said, I can't, meet up with a lot of people or with anyone. So I think that,
It's
yeah,
okay. Safety first, right?
51st, yeah.
Cool. Yeah, if people want to buy your prints and stuff, where can they find you?
So I recently made a website. It's jonsanchizfilm.com. And I don't have a lot of images on there, but I kind of curated it to like my best or favorite images. I offer prints on there, and then I offer prints from my Instagram page. I offer three sizes: 5x7, 8x10, and 11x14. Price wise, I always include free expedited shipping with my prints, and the quality is really well. It's on like really nice photo paper, and I always like to add this like white border on it, to make it like classic. And if you want to frame it, you could frame it like in a matte, frame, and it won't, mess with the image too much. But yeah, usually, definitely this year, I've been selling a lot more prints. Instead of doing more photo shoots, it's kind of flip flopped to selling more prints. I had a show a few weeks ago at this Latinx like based market. So it was highlighting, different Latinx artists and food vendors in Atlanta. And that was one of my first, markets. I think that was my first market, uh, you know, and just a Polaroid show, I went through my photos and chose a few prints, hoping that, I chose the right ones that people would be interested to buy. I did some from the series Vivian Sueños. I did some flowers, and same thing. I brought different sizes, and yeah, it was pretty successful. A lot of people, you know, were more tuned into the double exposures and some of my street photography photos. A lot
Nice.
of them were from like another series called Cholo Culture. So it was like riders, and I shot those all in black and white, and some in color too. But people were, gravitated to both of those just because, they're so like out there, I think.
So someone asked, can you tell us about the Lowrider series?
Yeah. So the Lowrider series, I think I started that in 2000. I was invited by this artist. I forgot his name now. But I was invited to this lowrider show that they were presenting in Gwinnett County, I think. I think it was sponsored by like Lowrider magazine, maybe, and some other vendors. And so I really wanted to, kind of document cholo culture and lowrider culture here in Atlanta. Being from California, I feel like that's something that, I always saw. Uh, my uncle was, definitely into that, lowriders, and, he was an artist as well. So he drew a lot of that, like that kind of imagery. So I started, trying to document it here in Atlanta to see, if it was just as big as, it was out there. And yeah, it's huge here in Atlanta. I shot that whole series in black and white. I brought two cameras with me. It was in July, so it was super hot. Um, and pretty much, yeah, it was like street style. So a lot of it was candid. Some of them were posed, but most of the images I shot were more candid. Style photography, and yeah, I just kind of shot it, as I felt, and walked around for hours, and ate a lot of awesome food at the show. One of my
Nice.
favorite series to continue it once COVID is you know we can go back to normal life.
I get that. If
Yeah.
if you're looking back at some of these things you've done and you are highlighting your culture, is there any other aspects that you really like to bring to the forefront from the Latinx community?
um, Definitely the food and the food and the people. That show that we did was sponsored by Bien Vegan. It was a Bien Vegano, so it was a lot of like vegan Mexican dishes, or Latin dishes. Which I grew up eating like tons of Mexican food, of course. But it was interesting, for the show specifically, them changing the recipes to be, like vegetarian and vegan friendly. And, that's something that, this year I've definitely been more vegetarian, and eating more of that. So I think, yeah, for the show,
Yeah.
the market itself, food wise, that was something that
Yeah,
was
I
interesting.
think that was the one with I think it's with My Abuela's Food and Patricia ATL too, right? I think
Yeah,
those are a couple of people who were there. Yeah, that was a really good one. Guys, if you haven't seen it, there will be another one of those markets and you should go and support and do the things. And the food is so good. Like it's so good. Um, but yeah, I think that's really awesome. If I'm hoping the lowriders come back at some point so we can see that happen again. I think that's really cool. Um, but yeah, I think if no one else has questions and stuff, we'll kind of wrap up. Guys, one, thank you, Jon, for coming and sitting in with me on a Saturday and like spending your time. I know that's a lot to ask of anybody at any point, but also if you haven't seen, if you're going to start photography and stuff, people, one, check out his work. It's really beautiful. If you need supplies, Sam Flax offers prints, frames, backdrops, the whole kit and caboodle. And Sophia and their staff is super well informed. They are more than willing to kind of help guide you, but do all the things. And yeah, thank you so much, guys. I hope everyone comes back the next go around and has a good Saturday.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And if anyone has any questions about photography or film, DM me and I'd be, more than happy to help and try to guide you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. All right, bye.
Bye. Have a good day.
You too.